Hey class, happy Friday. I hope you guys have had a fabulous week. I sure have missed you guys, but I'm enjoying reading with you. I'm here with Stella. She's literally sound asleep taking a nap. She was so naughty this morning. She spilled my coffee and my breakfast all over the floor. So she's tired from all her job of being a nuisance. We are going to read chapter 3 of She Dared, a story of Malala Yousafzai. I hope you guys are enjoying the book. I am enjoying your comments. I know Lexi mentioned how hard it is sometimes to listen and not feel the book and touch the book. I wish I was there with you. I wish I could give you the book, but unfortunately, just try to pay attention the best that you can and keep up with the story. It is a wonderful, wonderful story. All right, so chapter number 3, No More Books. Pakistan's army arrived in their jeeps and helicopters. This time they sent 10,000 men, enough for some to go to Mingora. When they arrived, Malala was at school. Helicopter propellers whooshed in the sky. Malala's teacher stopped talking. Many people in SWAT had never seen a helicopter before, and all her classmates began looking around. Then they all raced outside. Malala smiled. Across the school's courtyard was her father. They were glad the army had sent more men. Glad that the army would hopefully put a stop to Fazula's, but that night all she heard was bang, bang, bang. It was the boom of cannons and machine guns. Malala's heart beat very fast, and it was hard to fall asleep because of the noise. But she must have managed because she woke to her mom telling her that school was temporarily closed. Closed? Malala stayed glued to their TV watching the news, hoping for information, praying this would all be over soon. The fighting was happening farther north in the hills, but she could still hear the gunfire and blasts where she lived in the city. Thankfully, within the month, the army had chased the Taliban out of Swat and into the mountains. Can we go back to school now? Malala pleaded to her father. He replied yes, but there was something he wasn't telling her. What is it? She asked him. This will not last, he said, sadness in his eyes. The Taliban will be back. He was right. The Taliban militants slowly reemerged from the forest. They started taking over police stations again. They established a curfew. No one was allowed outside after dark. The radio mullah began his broadcast once more. If anything, the Taliban seemed more determined. Now Fazullah was saying only radio was allowed. No TVs, no CDs or DVDs, no computers, and no more books. Books? Malala's jaw dropped as she watched the news. Hundreds of CD and DVD shops closed. The owners were too scared to oppose the Taliban. Fazullah's men collected all their merchandise and created huge bonfires. Thick, black smoke plumbed high in the sky. It made her sick and sad. One of Malala's younger brothers asked, "Will we have to get rid of our TV?" "No," Malala's father insisted. He glanced at the door. Taliban men would often barge into the homes and take any TVs they heard. "We'll hide ours in the cupboard and keep the volume low." Malala would hide her books, too. When she wasn't reading them, they went under her bed. At night, Malala buried her head under her pillows to muffle the army's gunfire, shooting toward the mountains where the militants hid. With all the noise the army made, Malala didn't understand how it couldn't keep the Taliban out of her Swat Valley or even stop Falullah's broadcast. That is, until she learned that many of her neighbors were joining the Taliban. Some did out of fear to stop the Taliban from threatening them. When the Taliban went to people's homes and demanded money for rifles, some families were too poor. Instead, the Taliban took their sons to fight with them. Throughout it all, Malala focused on what was important to her, getting an education so she could become a doctor and help people. She'd be courageous, like Malalai of Maiwand, while her country battled. 6 days a week when she went to school, the big black iron door to the Kusal Girls' School was like a magical entrance to a world without violence. As the months went on and the fighting continued, school was Malala's refuge. So think for a second about what's happening to Malala. The Taliban is threatening to take her books, take her ability to go to school. It's threatening her family. It's taking neighbors and friends probably of hers to fight for what is not right. So think about how she might be feeling. Think about the title again, She Dared. What is she continuing to do? What is she continuing to work towards? Her goals, right? So she's not letting people threaten her out of working hard for her future. I love that about her. 6 days a week. Oops, I already read that. Then the unthinkable happened. The Taliban began bombing schools in the middle of the night. The first one was only 24 kilometers or 15 miles away. That was too close to home. It broke Malala's heart to think that any school could be destroyed. One day after classes, she searched her kitchen for a snack. There was a large broom. Her whole house, a large boom. Sorry, not broom. There was a large boom. Her whole house rattled, and the fan above the window crashed to the floor. No, she thought, petrified. So far, she'd only heard the bombings and fightings from a distance, but now bombings had come to Mingora. Malala was more scared than ever. Yet the more the Taliban tried to control Swat, the braver it seemed Malala's father became. He spoke out against them even more. To Malala, he said, "I will protect your freedom, Malala. Carry on with your dreams." So Malala continued to learn, even if many of her classmates were too scared to go to school. One of the 27 in her class, only 10 out of the 27 in her class, only 10 girls remained. Determined, Malala stuck to her plan in school. She snuck to school in plain clothes instead of her royal blue uniform. She jumped at every little sound on the street. If she's jumping at every sound, how do you think she's feeling? When you're easily startled like that, how are you feeling? If you're saying nervous, I agree with you. She looked over her shoulder every few steps, carrying her books discreetly under a shawl. Malala did everything she could to make sure no one knew where she was headed. That would be bad. In the neighboring country of Afghanistan, a different Taliban group also wanted to stop girls from going to school. They threw acid in the faces of girls who tried. So if you throw acid on somebody, it burns their skin. So the Taliban army was actually throwing acid on these girls that were still going to school to threaten them. The idea should have filled Malala with terror, but it mostly made her angry. It made Malala want to stand beside her father and shout how this was wrong. At 11 years old, Malala began giving speeches. Her father took her to a nearby press club where she squared her shoulders, raised her chin, and protested the banning of schools. It turned out Malala was a very good speaker, much like her father. People listened to him, and it seemed that people wanted to listen to Malala. Her first speech was publicized across Pakistan with the title, "How Dare the Taliban Take Away My Basic Right to an Education?" Afterward, in an interview, she said, "I don't understand what the Taliban is trying to do. How will someone accept our religion if you put a gun to their head and tell them to accept it?" She added confidently, "If you want people to be Muslim, show yourself to be a good Muslim first." In another interview, she was asked, "What would you do if there comes a day when you can't go to school?" "No," she shook her head. "This wouldn't happen." It could. At the thought, Malala started to cry, but she still didn't believe it. She couldn't. Not only a few months later, when the Taliban announced a new decree in January, all schools for girls were to close for winter break, as they usually did, but not reopen in February. The girls schools were to remain closed. Winter break was only weeks away. Could she stop them? Amidst the gunfire and explosions, Malala responded with more interviews and speeches. determined to voice how girls deserve to be educated as much as boys. After all, Malala read in the Quran how all people should seek knowledge, study hard, and learn the mysteries of the world. Then 2 weeks before winter break, and after almost a year of the Taliban terrorizing the SWAT village, Malala got the opportunity to tell the world what was happening in Pakistan. A radio correspondent who knew Malala's father was looking for a schoolgirl to write a diary for the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, about life under the Taliban. Malala wanted to be that girl. She wanted somebody to hear her words and to stop her school from being closed. Okay, so today I want you to think, how is the story progressing? So at the beginning, she just kind of heard about the Taliban. She heard about some of these things that could happen, and now those things are starting to happen in her town. So think about how is the story progressing? How are things getting scarier for Malala? Also, I want you to think and make a prediction. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think that she's going to be chosen to do this radio broadcasting? Do you think that she's going to continue to speak out against this unfair and unjust law that this Taliban army is trying to put on Pakistan and its women and its girls? What do you think? All right. I'm going to do one more post today and then we'll be done. So stay tuned for one more book and post your answers to the questions below. Bye, guys.